Don't let fear change your mind. Fear is often not a very good motivator to make giant life decisions. Welcome back to Wife Without Kids. I'm Hannah. This channel is all about building a supportive and non-judgmental community for people who have made the choice to not have any children. If you're thinking about making the decision to not have kids, it's going to be pretty normal that you're going to be worried that you're making the wrong decision or that you're going to have some huge regret in the future that you didn't have kids. There don't seem to be a lot of videos on YouTube that talk about this, so I'm going to talk about it in today's video. And I'm going to give you some reasons of why you should not be worried about the future fear that you might regret the decision you're making today to not have kids. One of the first things I think that's really important to ask yourself when you think about this idea of having fear sometime in the future because you made the choice not to have kids today is, where does that fear actually come from? Is it a legitimate fear that you really are worried that you're going to regret your choice in the future? Or is this fear a fear that other people have projected on you because they say to you, oh my goodness, you're not going to be a mom, you're definitely going to regret it. Here's why I think it makes a difference if the fear is really coming from you or if it's coming from someone else and they're projecting that fear onto you. If a parent is telling you that you're going to regret having kids, let's take a moment to think about what their life is like. They've spent 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years being a parent. Their entire life has been about their children and about providing for their children. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if you want to be a parent and that's the choice you're making. If a parent is thinking back on their life and they've loved being a parent and they can't imagine kids not being part of their life, of course they're going to tell you that, oh my goodness, you're making the wrong decision, because to them, their kids were everything. They wanted to be parents and they loved the experience of being a parent. But you're coming from somewhere different. You're coming from a place where you're saying, oh man, I don't really know if this is the right decision for me. So when a parent tells you that, I think you should take it with a grain of salt, because they're coming from one perspective, you're coming from a very different perspective, and those two might not actually line up. So I tried curling my hair today to make it look nice for my video. Look at my hair, it's like basically straight. I have the worst hair, it does not curl. I've even had hairdressers who know all the tricks about keeping your hair curled. They're like, you have like the worst hair to curl. It literally doesn't curl. Like it initially curls and after like 5 minutes it falls out, no matter what product I use for it. So yeah, my hair's kind of, I don't know. I tried, you guys, I really, really tried, but this is what we wound up with, so. Oh well. When this idea of regretting that you didn't have kids comes up, you know what's usually attached to it? The future. You may not regret it now, but sometime in the future, you're going to regret that you didn't have kids. My question is always, how do we actually know that? No one knows what the future is going to bring. You don't know what you're going to be thinking and feeling 20, 30, or 40 years from now. If you feel really strong right now that you don't want kids, that's the best decision that you can make right now for yourself. Thinking about a future regret that you may or may not have and basing a decision on that doesn't seem to be very logical. People who choose the child-free life have thought about the future, and they've thought about it a lot. It's not a decision that most of us take lightly at all. We think about the future and what our future might look like with children, or what that would look like without children, and how we could prepare for a future without children. Choosing not to have kids right now doesn't mean that suddenly, 30 years from now, you're going to have this massive void in your life and it's suddenly going to hit you. Oh my goodness, I didn't have kids. What was I thinking? Because if you're content without kids right now, if you're content without all those kid experiences or those parental experiences that you would have without kids, how can that suddenly shift 30 years down the road? Why is it that people think that if we're content and happy without children right now, that we would suddenly do a complete turnaround, and when we're 70, we suddenly are like, oh no, we actually did want the experience of having kids? Because I don't actually think you would, otherwise you would be having kids. If your gut is telling you right now that you don't want to be a parent, that you do not want to have kids, that you don't want that experience of being a parent, fear is probably not the emotion that we should be using to make a decision for a future regret we might have. If I really don't want to be a parent, but I'm worried because people tell me I'm going to regret it in the future, so out of fear I now become a parent for a future regret I may or may not have, there's nothing about that concept that makes any sense whatsoever. And yes, there are some parents that do regret having kids, but that's going to be a topic for a future video. Here's something else to think about. How many of us have regretted a decision that we've made? I think pretty much every single person that is watching this video can say, hey, you know what? I made this decision, it wasn't that good. I made that decision, life would have been better without that decision. We can all relate to making decisions that we've regretted. So here's kind of worst case scenario. If right now you don't want a child and you make the decision, you know what, I'm not going to be a parent, and you don't have a child, and sometime in the future, you're sitting in your rocking chair, you're knitting, you're sewing, you're doing whatever it is that you want to do with your retirement time, you realize, I really should have had kids. Even though I didn't want the experience of being a parent then, I really regret the decision that I made. There are still lots of ways that as a senior, you were able to contribute and help out someone that has kids. Life isn't over. There are potentially so many opportunities that you as an older person can have to help out the younger generation. There are lots of volunteer opportunities. Seriously, Pop onto Google, they're gonna be there. Maybe in your community, there's things advertised. You can be a big sister or a big brother, or in this case, it would be more like maybe a grandpa or a grandma to a younger generation aged child, that you would be able to help mentor them and guide them and spend time with them. There is always a way to minimize that sadness or that regret that you might feel by making a decision that is going to fulfill you in the way that you are looking to be fulfilled. Life isn't going to be filled with void just because you made the choice not to have kids when you were younger. You can still have a very full and meaningful life, and you can do that at any time that you want. You will still be able to cope with life even if you have a bit of a regret. The positive about this is you have so many years of life experience that when you come to a place where you have regret, if you do have regret about not having kids someday, you're going to find a way to cope. Don't underestimate your wisdom right now. There's probably some merit in that saying, older and wiser. You're going to be able to figure it out, don't you worry. And I actually haven't found very many studies for people who make the choice to be child-free that actually end up regretting it. Regret often seems to come more from the fact that people are child-free by circumstance and not by choice. And they were not able to make that decision to have a baby. It was their circumstance sort of forced it on them. Those individuals tend to have more regret and a bit more of a difficult time dealing with child-free life in later years. Here's another reason not to fear that you are making the wrong decision right now when it comes to having children. There are so many things that bring happiness to life, and that can be different for everyone. I love cooking and baking. That brings me happiness. Spending time with my husband, a quiet and tidy home, taking trips, well, not right now, but you know what I mean. Being able to sleep in, those are all things that bring me happiness. For someone who wants to be a parent, doing child-related things are what bring them happiness. There is a huge plethora of ways that happiness comes into our lives, and we get to determine what those things are. Even people within the child-free community don't find happiness in the same ways. Some of you guys love having pets. Some of you guys can't stand animals and you don't want them in your home. When we get really worked up and scared about this idea that we might be making the wrong decision, we put a lot of effort and energy into this idea that if we don't have kids, we're going to miss out on something. We're going to miss out on like the epitome of what is happiness in life. And that simply isn't true. Happiness comes to people in so many different ways. And yes, for some people, that is having children and having a family. But for other people, it's the exact opposite. We are not missing out on a huge part of life just because we don't have kids, especially if that having kids and that family ideal isn't what we're looking for. Society has really pushed this idea that you need to have the big house in the beautiful neighborhood, you need to have 2.5 kids, maybe a cat or a dog, you need to have the white picket fence, you need to have the minivan or the truck or whatever it is you want to cart your children around in, and that's the ideal family picture. That family picture equals happiness. And if you don't have those kids, you're definitely going to be missing out. Your life will never quite be as happy. That is so not true. We are not going to be doomed to feeling completely unfulfilled as women or as individuals if we choose not to have kids. So forget about this idea that happiness equals family and that equals children, and if you don't have that, you're going to regret it. And yes, while children and family life is very appealing to some people and it brings them a lot of happiness, it is not the only way to get happiness in life. Now in life, we have all sorts of decisions to make. We have big decisions, we have little decisions, and we may spend a little bit more time thinking about making life decisions that are really, really big. We don't live in this place where we are constantly thinking, am I gonna regret that decision? Am I gonna regret that decision? Am I gonna regret that decision? We don't think like that. We're not really taught to think like that, except when it comes to the concept of having children. It's this idea, if you decide not to have kids, you're absolutely gonna regret it. We spend so much time in this area of regret when it comes to making the choice to not have kids, and I wonder why that is. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the regret we're going to have in all the other decisions that we make in life. The decision of whether or not to have kids is just one decision that you're going to make in life. Yes, it's a really big decision, and I'm not minimizing that it's a huge choice, but it's just one decision. Cultural and societal pressure to have children is massive. It always has been. I think it will continue to be, but as we continue to talk about child-free being a choice, I hope that that is going to diminish a little bit. It's not that I'm trying to get people to change their minds that I don't want people to have kids. If you want to have kids, that's amazing. Go ahead, be a parent. But I don't think people should be made to feel bad if they make the choice that, hey, you know what? I don't want to be a parent. I have no interest in being a parent. Women and men should not be shamed for that decision. Part of the reason I think this sort of comes into play is because women have often been seen, especially in the past, as that is your role. You can have children, so you should have children. You should want to be a mother. And at some point in life, if you make the decision, decision not to be a mom, you will have regrets. You will be wallowing in sorrow. You will be so upset that you didn't make the choice to be a parent because that's what you were made for. That's what you were supposed to do. And because you went against nature or you went against biology or whatever it is that you want to call that urge that women should have to have kids, you did not fulfill that urge. So there is nothing but regret that lies in your future because of the decision that you made not to have kids. There's this idea that because women can have kids and that was what they were meant to do according to society, that if you don't have kids, it's only a matter of time and you will have regret. You will pity yourself. You will be wallowing in your own despair and misery because you didn't have children. The idea that a woman actually doesn't want to have a kid and won't despair or be regretful of that decision is actually very foreign, or so it seems. I've had so many people tell me that you are going to regret having kids. Men have told me that. Women have told me that. And you know what? I don't have any regrets. I don't think I'm going to have regrets because I'm not interested in being a parent. You can't regret something that you didn't want to experience in the first place. Can you? Can I regret the fact that I was never a parent if I didn't ever want to be a parent? I don't think so. It's almost like society has conditioned women to feel guilty about making the choice to not have children. There is this negativity that is attached to an individual who does not want to be a parent, especially for women. I think it's where all these ideas of you're going to be lonely if you don't have kids come from, or you're going to feel unfulfilled, or you're going to have deep regrets. We are being told we will, but that simply isn't the truth. I've said it so many times in videos, I feel like people are gonna get so sick of hearing me say this, but one decision does not equally fit every single individual in the world. We have an option to be a parent or to not be a parent. We cannot assume that every single individual in the entire world wants to be a dad or wants to be a mom. That is just not realistic. There are people who have zero desire to be a parent. It's not because they're tricking themselves. It's not because they're delusional. It's not because they're crazy. It's because they don't want to be a parent. Now, for some people, the choice to not have kids is a really easy one. And for me, it was pretty easy. I just kind of decided years ago when I was in my teens, I just wasn't interested in being a parent, and that has never changed for me. But for some people, it is a bit more of a struggle. It's not so straightforward. It's not so cut and dried. Some people really have this deep anguish over this idea of, should I be a parent or shouldn't I be a parent? And am I going to make the wrong choice? If you are someone that knows right away, hey, you know what? I don't want to be a parent. It is not for me. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's almost like if you don't go through this period of like sort of anguish or this like inner debate with yourself, that you're not really a real woman if you haven't spent hours like lamenting over this like to be a parent or not be a parent decision. So I would say to you, do not let cultural pressure or societal pressure put this fear in you that makes you feel like you're going to regret something that you know is right for you. Why do we mistrust ourselves so much? There's this idea that when we talk about regret in the future, it sort of translates into you must mistrust yourself. You must not trust your gut feeling or your heart or your mind or whatever it is that we're using to make the decision to not be a parent. Why is this idea that we have to mistrust ourselves so strong? I think we all have that like gut instinct when you just know a decision is right for you, even though you can't necessarily explain it to somebody or someone else can't understand it. We're making that decision based on what we know about ourselves. I don't know that we should really mistrust our decision-making ability. We have to make decisions about life. Sometimes we'll change our minds, sometimes we won't. And you know what? That's okay too. If you're in your 20s right now and you are absolutely adamant that you don't want a baby, and you know, one day in your 30s, you decide, you know what? I actually do want a baby and I've changed my mind. Absolutely go ahead, have a baby if that's what you want to do. Because you're allowed to change your mind, but you're also allowed to not change your mind. If you choose to be child-free when you're 18 and now you're 45 and you still want to be child-free, you still get to make that choice to be child-free. You don't have to mistrust yourself and think that other people or society knows you better than you know yourself. As humans, we each have the ability to make decisions, to think for ourselves, and I think we really need to utilize that when it comes to being child-free. We're allowed to choose the child-free life. We don't have to feel guilty about it. We don't have to fear the future because someone is telling us we're going to change our minds. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, all right, Hannah, you've got some good points, but I still have that fear inside me and I'm still really worried about it. Go ahead and check out this video right here. They are people who are older and wiser than I am, and they will let you know if they have regretted their choice to live child-free. Thank you to all of you guys that take the time to watch my videos. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate when we can get conversation going about topics like this because they are really important. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.